Hello, everyone. Sorry for waiting, but people are still joining. I think we're ready to start now. So welcome to this session number 7 of the One-Click LCA Summer School. Today's topic is going to be about boosting efficiency in calculations, importing bill of material quantities from BIM and building energy modeling software and other sources. Some general rules that you might have already familiarized already. We are keeping your microphones muted because there are so many of you. So we do that for housekeeping. You can ask questions using the Q&A function, and my colleagues will be able to answer to your questions while I am presenting. And anything that will be left, we'll have that 30 minutes dedicated space at the end of this session, so we can I can answer live. And recordings and the slides are going to be available next day. So last session you did talk about the Carbon Designer tool, which is ideal for early phases. You discussed about optimizing the baseline results. You talked about calculating impacts of construction materials and interpreting results and other aspects. Today, we're gonna have an overview of the different import methods for One-Click LCA. Then we're gonna look at, we will have an example of importing an Excel file. And then we'll have some showcases of the Revit plugin, Tekla, IES, Rhino, and Grasshopper. And then just very briefly, we're going to look at the homework that you can do after this session. Material information sources, you can obviously, as you have all already probably seen in the previous sessions, you can get those information from several different sources. Obviously, you can do it manually from getting quantities from drawings, measuring plans, sections, sketches, and so on. You can get them from cost plans. And of course, today we're going to focus on BIM models. One of the challenges with BIM integrations is that not all models are on the same level of detail or level of development. So some models are on the early stages, some others are on detailed stages, and they have more information, more accurate information. So we're also going to talk about how you can use those models at different stages and get the most out of them. Integrations that you are able as users to use. We've got IES and Design Builder, which are energy simulation software. So you can import the modeled materials as well as the energy consumption as well. Design software like Revit, ArchiCAD, Tekla Structures, Rhino, and Grasshopper. You can also upload directly Excel and GBXML files, as well also import IFC files. So this is important actually, and I'm going to stress that even if there is a software that is not directly integrated with One-Click LCA, you can always export those quantities in one of those formats and just import them to One-Click LCA. I think most of the BIM solutions should be able to export everything in Excel or as a minimum an IFC file. And then we've got some BIM management tools like Trimble Connect, Solibri, and Simple BIM as well. Some of those are ideal for early phases, some others are better for detailed stages. So we're going to have a look at all of those during this session. Having said that, I think those are my slides for today. So I will just straight away jump into the live demonstration and show you how you can import some Excel files. So I'm gonna go straight to one-click LCA and open one of the demo projects I have prepared. All right, that should not really take that long. Okay, here it is. Apologies for that. So I'm going to use that test design, and what you can do is go directly find the tool that you're working on, although it doesn't really matter because all the quantities are imported to all the different tools that you are using in this specific project. So in this case, I just have this one tool. I'm going to click on that drop-down list and select import Excel or GDXML file. At this point, it will ask me to choose the file I want to import. But before that, I should have shown you actually the Excel template that you can use in those cases. So I will do it step by step. I'm not just going to show you the template. So I'll just show you how you can also find it in our help center. So if you just type Excel here, import from Excel file, you can open it in a separate tab. You can read through all these guidelines, and at the bottom of this article, there are several different templates in metric and imperial units, and for infrastructure building projects as well as greenhouse gas reporting. So in this case, I'm going to use the building LCA with metric systems. So I'm just going to download that one, and I will go back to my project and go and find that template, which is that one. And I should probably also show you how it looks like, obviously. So give me 1 second to open that one so that we know what we are importing. I see someone is asking if I can zoom in a little bit. Yes, I will do that. Thanks for letting me know. So this is the Excel template with several different columns. The most important ones being the first ones, like the material name, the quantity, the unit or quantity type, the thickness where this is relevant, obviously for some of the materials that you have defined the area, transport kilometers if you know it, if not you can just delete it, comments if you want to add, and then there are several other parameters on top which are relevant only for some of the tools, like for example the BREEAM UK tool or the BREEAM International tool, and some others as well for schemes around the world. So in this case, I'm not gonna need all of those, so I can simply just delete those and just focus on those ones. And you can, obviously this is just an example, so you can delete all those as well and add your own quantities. I'm not going to change anything right now for this session, so I have already added it, and I'm going to hit continue and zoom in a little bit here as well. I hope that looks better now. So next step, the software is going to ask me what project I want to import these quantities on. This is the project that we are working on, and then which design we can add it to the test import, which is the design that I started, or we can just make a new design. We can select that one. The tool that you're working on and any filtering settings. Let's say that we want to add all data, or in some other case might just add structure and envelope, depending on the scope that you're looking for. But in most cases, you will have created the Excel file according to your scope anyway. So you can just choose all data. You can click continue, and we can rename this as Excel. You should know all of these already, so I'm not going to go into too much details. Just continue. So what this states, what the software is asking you to do is to define the rules with which it is going to group the various materials. So we have imported all those different parameters: class, material, quantity type, thickness, and comment. So by setting those three, we mean that all the materials that have the same name, they have the same unit, and they have the same class, you can group them under one row, and the rest will be different separate rows. In this case, we are not able to see any groupings because we just use a template which has so few materials, so there's no grouping happening in this case. But these would be really useful in bigger projects with lots of different instances of the same material. At the next step, you will be able to see the identified data, and in another section here, the unidentified data. In this case, there's no unidentified data, and this is because obviously I did run this before, so the software remembers my selections. And by that, I mean that it has already assigned some data sets in the materials that I imported. So let's take the columns one by one, actually. So we've got the material column, which is the material name from the Excel file, the class, the comment, your own organization classification system, which you can change it here or just leave it for later. And it's actually optional, so you don't have to do this. The quantity and the share of the volume compared to the overall volume of all the materials. And in this column, we have the resource name. So this is the actual data set that the software has assigned to this material. And right next to it, we have the mapping basis, which means actually what rule the software used in order to define this, this mapping. So this means, in this case, it says your mapping. So it means that previously I used exactly the same name, material name. And at that time, I did use this exact data set. So the software remembers it, and it has already assigned it here, and it just informs me why it did that. Where a mapping of my own is not available because I didn't do it in the past, next we'll look for mappings from my colleagues, users who are in the same organization within the tool. And you can see in this case, because we are all using this template for training purposes, it's either your mapping or colleague mapping for all the materials. Apart from that, if none of those applies, the software will try to do mapping based on users in the same country or then global users, or if it's unable to find a good mapping, it will list it in a separate section down below. And obviously, this field will look like that. So it's going to be empty, and it will prompt you to find the material. So in this case, I'll just look for reinforcement, and I'll just use that one. Yes, and when you do that, actually, when you add the mapping yourself, it will find all the similar materials in your import, and it will list them. It will list all of them in this pop-up window and ask you which of those materials you want to apply the same data set. In this case, it's just one, so just click on that one, or you could just double all, and that should do the work, or just say no thanks and do it manually on your own if you want to assign a different material. So I'm going to hit that one. And yeah, of course, you can, if some of those quantities are wrong, or they are, they're not needed, or they are out of scope for this LCA, for example, if it was a BREEAM project and you had like furniture in it and so on, you could just delete them. So for now, I'm going to continue. And this will take me straight to the results page with all the different results, as you have probably already seen in the software, this familiar table and these nice graphs down below. And if we go to the building materials page, you will see that all those different materials are now part of the one-click LCA model. The comments have been transferred, as well as the quantities and obviously the units. And transport kilometers, I don't remember if we imported them, but if we had done, it would apply those numbers as well here. And obviously you can always, once you have imported them, you can do several changes if you want. I'm not going to change anything for now. And this should be the Excel import. I can keep an eye on the questions at the same time, but yeah, feel free to ask any questions, and if they're not answered by in the next 1 hour or so, I'll be able to look at them and answer live. Next, I think I'm going to show you the Revit integration. So I have opened the sample Revit model in Revit 2021, but it doesn't make any difference the version. And I have clicked on the one-click LCA tab at the top, and you will notice here that there are two different options. There is an LCA in cloud option and an LCA in Revit option. The LCA in cloud option, what it actually does is that it takes all the quantities, all the material quantities that have been modeled in this Revit model, and it will just upload it straight away to your one-click LCA account in a very similar way with Excel. And we can actually do that so that you can have a look. So it will literally just upload everything, and it will open your one-click LCA account in your browser. And yeah, here it is. And from this point onwards, it's exactly the same process as with Excel. So it will ask you where you want to import the quantities, the tool, the filtering settings, and what you really want to do. And this reminds me actually that I forgot to mention how to update quantities with Excel, but let's leave it after Revit so that we don't interrupt this. So yeah, that should be it, the LCA Cloud for the Revit plugin. You can always download the Excel file once you have uploaded everything. So what this does is that it gathers all the material quantities and puts them in an Excel file, which looks like that. And so that you can have a quick check if you want, change some numbers if you want, if your model is not very accurate and it needs some adjustment, you can do it here. You can see also the category here and information like area, volume, length, and others as well. So I'm gonna close that one. And I think I might just go one step back and show you actually how to update things when you import anything really. So in this case, I will just go back to Excel, import design. And before I do that, I will make a copy of that and keep the same name, or actually I will just open that one and make some changes really. Just to showcase that function as well. So let's say that we want to change that quantity to 80 cubic meters, and we also want to add some reinforcement for foundation. So I'll just add the same line just down to the bottom. I will change that one to foundation. I'll keep the quantity the same, doesn't matter, and say foundation. So I'm going to save that, close it, and in one-click escape, I can click here and say import Excel or GVXML. Exactly the same step. I'm going to define the Excel file. Hit continue. And the same project, same design, all data, but in this case, okay, I will just update it because I should be able to see. Oh, yeah. I will select to update the Excel file actually, and once I continue, it will actually summarize all the changes actually and all the updates that I am about to make in the very last step. So here it is. It says all the updated data are listed here. Obviously, in this case, it is just one row. So it goes from 40 to 80 cubic meters, and then there are some additional data that we are recording, and this is it, and this is all the unchanged data. So once we're happy, we can just continue, and it will update the one-click IC model. All right, so that was it about updating imports, either Excel or anything else really. And sorry for that if I went a bit, if I did one step back, but we are continuing with Revit. So we covered the LCA in cloud, and let's have a look at the LCA in Revit. So you can use that one for the cases where you want to do a life cycle assessment in Revit. So by clicking that, it will open a new window in the Revit environment. So the first tab is the Settings tab. Again, I'm not going to go into details about each one of them, but very quickly, probably the most important ones are the scope. So you can define what is your scope. Is it the building only? Is it mechanical, equipment, plumbing, electrical, and external areas as well? For the sake of this demo, I'll just say building, and then the other most important setting is actually how you want to progress with the quantities takeoff. So at this point here, you can select to keep the objects grouped or split the objects to materials. So that means for those who are not familiar with Revit, if I select any of those elements in Revit, so this is an element. If I click Edit Type and go and check all the materials, you can see there is a list of different materials that make up this element. So bringing plugin back in the screen. So by selecting the Keep Objects group, it means that it will get the total area of this element and the total area of this roof element and this slab and so on. And if I select the split objects to materials, this will basically split those objects and report all the different materials that make up those objects instead of just the object type. So I think for this purpose, I will keep the objects grouped, and we can split some of them later on. I will show you how. You can define also the units right here. And next tab is a model tab, where you can actually define what elements you want to include in your material takeoff. And you do that by including the different phases or design options or link models. So in Revit, you have the ability to split your model into the various phases of your project. So this could be an existing building, and then you're building a new one. So those the elements of those two phases will be assigned to their own Revit phase. Or if it is a very big building, you could split it into several phases of construction, and then you can select which phases you want to do an LCA for. And then you can also have the opportunity to model different design options. So when you're if you're still looking at different options, you can model all those options in Revit, and you can select which of those options you want to include in your assessment. So in this case, we don't have any design options, so we don't really see anything. And of course, if you have linked models, you're able to include those ones as well in your assessment. So particularly for bigger projects, you will most commonly have an architectural model, at least one architectural model, and at least one structural model, and then MEP model, and so on. So if you're doing a full building LCA, it will be quite handy actually to just open one model and get all the quantities out of it. So in this case, I'll just select all the different phases and go to the next tab, which is the categories. So in this tab, we are looking at all the available categories within that model. So we've got some plumbing fixtures, ceilings, doors, walls, and so on. We can specify if we want to include all those categories or not. So in this case, let's say I don't want to include any generic models, for example, because I see that they are mostly like washing machines, cooktops, and dishwashers and stuff like that. So I think those can be left aside. You can change the unit, the default unit. You will get all the different quantity types like volume, area, and number of units, but the primary unit you can change here. So for doors, you can use that one, or you can change to area if you want, and you can do that at element type basis. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different door types, and you can include some of those and leave some others out of scope. You can also split objects to materials. You will see that all those boxes are unchecked, and this is because we selected to keep the objects grouped at the settings tab. But we have the opportunity actually to split those in the categories tab as well, by category or by family type. So if we go to the walls, let's say currently we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, some 8 different walls. So let's say that we know that this wall type is modeled quite accurately and in high detail. So we want to split that type into materials, and we're going to check how it looks like later on in the materials tab. where we actually have, again, a list of all the different categories, but when we actually expand those, we will be able to see all the different family types or materials in this case, as we can see. So this is the wall type that we split into materials, and we've got a couple of wall types that have been added as objects instead. Let's try to, and this is actually the tab that we can start adding some mappings. Yeah, in this case, it has already added some of those materials because I was just running this just before this session. So let's try to add something else. Let's do that one actually, the wall timber clad. So this is a whole construction. So ideally, we would like to apply a construction for that. I'm pretty sure that you did talk about constructions and what they are, but just in case, constructions are actually groups of materials that represent an entire construction, like a wall or a floor or a roof or anything else. So in the case of a wall, it's going to have the external finishes, the core materials, and the internal finishes as well. So in the material, I'm going to say that I'm looking for, these are actually the filter fields, similar with the cloud application. So right here, I'm going to find the external wall constructions and see what we've got here. So we've got some external wall for apartment buildings and some external wall for single house wooden stud frame. I think that should be a good match. And yeah, in the same way, you do the same thing actually for materials in the cases where the types have been split into materials. Obviously, you can do this one by one in this page, but this is going to be relatively time consuming, or you can go straight to the results, and these will basically try to do some automated mappings for you. I think I have already logged in before the session, so it should be running now. And yeah, so if we open any of those, you will see that it has made some material mappings, and it gives all the different results right here. And if we go back to the materials tab, and I think we were looking at exterior walls, you'll see that all of those rows now have a mapping, a mapped material as well. The ones that we did manually, this one as well, a couple of more that I did before the session, they are still here, and just added some others that were left empty really. So any of those materials, if you're unsure where they are in the model, or if you want to check some additional information to help you understand what they are, you can select on those rows and isolate the materials in the Revit model, and this will actually hide everything except for that. So you can click on that one, click on any of those elements, and go to the edit type and look for some information like the description here, which is very often filled in. So these will be like a more detailed description rather than the type name, which is also wall timber clad. So it says it's a structural insulation panel with kiln dry timber panel rain screen. So you're able to, so then you know what you should be looking for in the one-click LCA database, or just go and check the materials as well if there are any. I'll just bring everything back in. Going to the results again, you can color code the results based on the impacts as well. So these will allow you to do a quick hotspot analysis. Yeah, takes a few more seconds. Yeah, I see I've got another request to zoom in, but I don't think I'm able to do that in the actual plugin. So apologies for that. Yeah, we will have to check the recording, how it looks like, and if it's too difficult to see what it says here, we'll have, we need to check if we can zoom in the video actually. Yeah, so at this point, you can actually see that the model has been color coded. So you can say, obviously, from green to red, it goes to smaller embodied carbon per square meter to higher. And you can do this in relative to square meters as well. Yeah, there we are. And we've got another tab with the graphics where you can actually see what are the biggest contributors on a material basis or on input basis actually, because some of those inputs are materials and some of those are whole objects. So you can see, I think this one is the wall type that we actually didn't split into materials, and then we've got all the other materials as well. And I think that should conclude Revit as well. So I'm gonna close this. Feel free to keep asking. I see there are a few questions, so keep asking on the Q&A window, and my colleagues should be able to answer. Next, I'm gonna open IES. Actually, I have it already open. So I have a sample model here, and this will literally take just 1 or 2 minutes, because all you have to do is go to the navigators and you will find one-click LCA here. And once you select it, you just upload the materials and energy. So the benefit for doing this is because for the energy simulations, all the material information will be there, at least the material information for the envelope. Obviously, you will not have any structural frame and so on, but the envelope should be there and relatively accurate enough. So when the one-click LCA window opens, it is asking you whether you want to include the energy results or not. So you have 2 options. You either go with no energy results, so you just take the material information, or you select the energy results as well. So I'm gonna run that. And that will take us to the familiar now one-click LCA interface for importing quantities. All right, here it is. There we are. And from this point onwards, it's exactly the same process. I'm not going to go through that. I'll just download the Excel so that you can see what kind of quantities we have taken from the IES model. So you will be able to see some material quantities as well as some energy results as well. Yeah, there we are, material quantities, and then we've got 2 additional rows for gas and electricity as well. Yeah, I'm gonna close that now. And next, I think I'm gonna open Rhino. Okay, that should take a few more seconds for Rhino to open. Here we are. All right. Still loading. Let me check the Q&A session in the meantime. Oh, here we are. I'm going to open one of those 2 files. Oh, yeah, here it is. I was just about to answer to one of the questions, but we are ready to continue. So I've got this test model for Rhino, and right here we've got the one-click LCA plugin, which will be actually in your right-hand side, right next to the properties and the layers tab. So one important thing to remember for Rhino is that you have to do a proper layer management, let's say. So that means that layers in this case are very important, because it is the layers that you are mapping with different materials. And this is because in Rhino we don't have material information in the same way as in Revit. So the material is not an additional property. So we do that by splitting the building and different building parts into different layers. So in this case, I've got slabs, different layers, a different layer for the slabs, for the columns, internal walls, partition walls, external walls, and windows. And if we go the one-click LCA plugin, by selecting them, I will be able to see what elements are included in those layers as well. So first thing, we start by, in the same way, we start adding some, doing some material mappings. So for the slabs, I should look for some concrete, let's say C32, and I want this to be a one-click LCA generic material, because I'm at a very early stage, so I'm not in a stage where I'm looking for a specific concrete manufacturer. So I'll just search for that. And we are looking at C32 different mixes. I'm going to use the zero recycling binders because I'm building a baseline. And I'm going to say that I need, I'm going to assign it to a layer with square meters, because it's just a surface, it's not a volume. So I select the layer I want to map it with and just click on the map to selected layer. And this means that I also need to define the thickness for that, because it is just a surface. So let's say that would be 250 millimeters thick slab. Similar for quantities, I can, since it's columns, I can assign the same material, but with volume instead. Because as you can see, the unit is in cubic meters. For internal walls, yeah, I will still use exactly the same material because it's basically the core walls. So I'll just change it to square meters for speed's sake and just map to the same layer, just add another 200 millimeters thick walls. And then the partition walls, I will need to find something that I can add it with on an area basis. So there are two ways of doing it here. Obviously, because it is an early stage model, I have just modeled some surfaces, so I don't have the build-up information right here. I might know what it's going to be, but I have not modeled it already in the model. So there are two different ways. The first one is to find probably one of the different materials that consist this wall, which could be a gypsum board or a metal stud layer or some acoustic insulation, and then continue to the cloud and add all the other materials separately and manually. Or you could actually map a construction in this case as well. So I'll just reset everything. And in the material section, I'm gonna look for internal wall constructions. To get that and search. And this will show me all the different wall constructions for internal walls. Let's say that I want some steel stud internal walls with mineral wool and plasterboard. So I will map that. And then we've got some external walls. Similar way, I think I'm gonna just assign some external wall construction. So I will look for external wall constructions. And that could potentially be yeah, something like that. And finally, the windows. I'm gonna look for some aluminum windows, aluminum frame windows. And I'll just add any of those really for speed's sake. And I'll just map that. Then we've got the layers where you can actually exclude some of the layers if you want, or you also have the option to group or ungroup them. So in the case of Windows, it tells us here that there are 72 different elements that are being modeled and assigned to each layer. So if I ungroup that, I will then have to map all the different windows one by one, or just keep it grouped and assign the same material in there as well. Yeah, settings. In terms of settings, you defined what database you want to include. So I left it to European data, but yeah, if you're working with another database, this should be the first thing you should do. And then the results. I'm going to refresh it, and this will give me some results. Oops, yeah, I forgot to do that. Yeah, load it first. Okay. Let's go back to results and refresh. Okay, and here we are. So we've got some initial results, and we can keep playing with the Rhino model, changing the geometry, changing the material mappings so that we can reduce those impacts. As we will see later on, it's coupled very, very nicely with grasshopper as well. So we can make some scripts as well and try to reduce the embodied carbon as much as possible. But for now, I am going to click on LCA Cloud, and these will actually export everything to Ungroup LCA, to your Ungroup LCA account. In this case, it is exactly the same process with Excel, but in this case, I will do it once again because I want to show you how you can actually use any integration, actually coordination with Carbon Designer, which I believe is what you discussed yesterday. So we name this as Rhino Summer School, and let's add that. And I'll continue that. And you can see here that all of the materials have been identified simply because I basically mapped them in the model. So I'm going to continue that as well. And that takes us to the results page directly. So what I wanted to show you, if we go to the building materials, is that one could potentially ask, how do we make a whole building LCA using a model like this in Rhino, where you actually missing lots of information like foundation, probably ground floor slab, and ceilings and so on. So you can either just do an assessment of what you have modeled, because this is what you're looking at the moment, and just leave the whole building for later on, or you could import all those quantities and all the mappings that you did in the cloud application. And these will take you here. You see that we've got all the different materials that we imported here, and then continue with Carbon Designer by clicking here and say Carbon Designer create baseline. And these will actually fill all the different gaps that you may have in your building. So building type, I'll just leave as VK buildings. Let's say that it is an office building. I'll just go through very quickly because I think you looked at this yesterday. Gross floor area, let's say it's 2,000 square meters. Number of above ground floors, I think it's around 5. The calculation period, let's say 60 years. And let's say that we also have one floor underground, which is used for car parking. And the foundation type, because of the soil conditions, let's say that we will need some concrete piles that are some 20 meters deep. And the baseline scenario, we know that this is going to be concrete in situ. So let's calculate the areas. Obviously, you can change any of those numbers here if you know them. which you should know because you already have some kind of 3D model, but I'm not going to change anything here, but I will focus on this side of this window. So I'm going to keep all the foundations and substructure because I don't have any quantities from my model. I will keep the ground slab because I didn't model it as well. But for floor slabs, I'm going to take those out because I know that I did model them, and I will take them. I'll take the columns out as well, and the beams because I know that I'm not going to have any beams. The balconies, I know that I will not. The balconies and staircases, I can leave them. Underground walls, I need them. I don't need the external walls because I got them from Rhino, as well as the windows and external doors and the roof slab. But I will leave the roofs actually because this is actually the roofing materials on top of the structural slab of the roof, let's say. Internal walls, I will leave them as it is because this refers to the finishes as well as the floor finishes and ceiling finishes too. So I'm going to create a baseline. And we've got our Carbon Designer interface right here where we can change the various constructions for the various elements. You will see that we only have the building parts that we wanted to include from Carbon Designer. So we don't have any external walls or upper floors and so on. I'm not going to change anything because I'm sure you covered that yesterday. So what I'm going to do is save this design to query, and this will actually ask me if I want to overwrite it, which I would normally want to do if I started immediately from Carbon Designer, or just merge it. So this is what I want to do. So this means that it will keep all the quantities that we imported from from Rhino, but it will also add all those new material quantities from Carbon Designer. And of course, as always, you're able to change any of those, either the quantities, if you know them, or if you are now able to estimate them better, or just delete them, add new materials, and so on. So this way, you're able to have a full building LCA with an early phase model. And with that, I think I'm gonna stop some Rhino and probably close that tab as well, and open a new Rhino model, a new empty file actually. So
Mario, should we have a 2-minute break?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
2 or 3 minute break?
Yeah. Of course. So yeah, let's be here at past 6. 6 past, whatever your time zone is, and see you in 2 minutes. All right. So we are ready to continue, I guess. I was going to open a new Rhino model, which is empty, so I'm just gonna use that template. So we can have a look at what we can do with Grasshopper. It's going to be a very simple script just to show you the nodes, the one-click LCA nodes that are available. And obviously, after that, you will be able, if you are familiar with Grasshopper, you can do so many different and interesting things to optimize your design in terms of embodied carbon. So I'm going to open Grasshopper. right, let's close that. I've got one Grasshopper script made already, which what it actually does is just creating a very simple geometry. And you can change it by changing the width and the length and so on. So I'll just try to make something parametric. Actually, my colleague tried to do something parametric, and we're using this this Rhino model, this Grasshopper script, and you can also change the column thickness as well. So I'm not going to go into details of that part of the script because that is just for creating this geometry, which is not part of this session anyway. So I'll just go through the outputs of the script up to this point. So we've got 4 different geometries, one for the upper slab, actually the roof, and the columns, and the external walls, as well as the windows. So what we need to start doing in this script is actually adding some nodes to define what materials all those geometries are. So if we click on the one-click LCA tab, first node we're going to need is the LCA profile. Yeah. Oops. We will have to wait for a few seconds. Yeah, that's definitely not a normal behavior, but yeah. It happens when you have so many different programs opened. All right, here we are. So we got the LCA profile here. And let's remember, this is the slab. So what we want to do is, in this case, find a suitable concrete mix because we want this to be concrete. So I can say C32, again, just use exactly the same material as with the Rhino example. And I want this to be a one-click LCA generic material. So let's say, what is that one? Apologies for that, my computer has become a little bit too hot and it's performing not very nice. But yeah, here we are. So we are able to see what the full name of the materials. So in this case, I'll just use this one with 10 to 25% alternative binders. So let's choose that one. And then I'm gonna need to define the material. So I'm gonna add that node over there and connect the LCA profile with that node and also feed the geometry in here. So now this node knows what geometry we have and what is the material of that, but we still get a warning, which means that in this case, if you just click here, it will show you the different warnings. So it says that we need to specify the thickness for quantity. So what we can do is say that this is going to be a 250 millimeters thick slab. And we're going to plug this in here. And we are ready with that. So we're going to do this exactly the same thing with all the other geometries. I will just do something very quickly, actually. I'll use exactly the same LCA profile. So I'll just use that one. And that geometry because that is columns and I want them to be concrete. And then we've got the external walls. I'm going to need another LCA file node. And in a similar way, I can go to the material and look for some external wall constructions. So I'm going to scroll down a little bit. There we are. And let's put available. Let's say that we want this to be a brick sandwich wall. Or you can just assign a single material and then continue to the cloud, as we said earlier with Rhino, and just add new materials. Or you can add materials for the same layer, actually not layer, but for the same geometry, you can add more than one materials. We can check that in the next geometry as well. So let's add this LCA file here. And this geometry right here. I'm not going to do the same because it's exactly the same really for Windows. So for time's sake, because we are running out of time, let's not do that. Now, what I wanted to do actually is to show you how you can add more than one materials in the same geometry. And I think the best option would be for the roof. So we've got this geometry, which we applied a concrete material. So I'm gonna add another profile. I say profile, and let's say that we want to add some EPS insulation as well. So I'm gonna code the material and go to EPS. Or you could always just use the search function and write your specific product or just any other keyword. But for speed's sake, I'll just do it like that. I'll just use a 150 millimeters thick EPS insulation, and then I will need another node like that to link this LCA profile, and then again the same geometry, which is the roof slab. And we can also define the thickness. Let's say that that would be like 120 millimeters thick. Oops. There we are. And then we've got the constructions. So for each material node, we will need one construction if we want to report them separately. So I'm going to do that. And I'm also going to have one more construction for that geometry. Like that. And you can also add comments like let's say that this is roof type 1 or anything like that. So this can go to that material. So when you export all the material quantities, you can take that comments with you. And then we will need a run LCA node. So we can start plugging in all those constructions one by one. And we'll need to tell the script that we want to run it. Just double click on it. But I will also need a button actually to allow me to log in. I'll just put it here and press it, and this will ask me to fill in my details. All right, and there we are. Okay, that did work, and then we can check the results. Right, right here. And we can do several kinds of analysis directly in Rhino. So we can check the result by absolute impacts. And we can see all those numbers feeding in the model. We can check the results by volume or result, share, and several other options. And of course, depending on the script that you have made, I mean, this one is quite simple. You can all do all sorts of changes by changing different parameters in your building and get instant results. Now this would go a bit faster in a faster computer, but in this case, because I've got all the software open, it takes a few seconds for every iteration. And of course, you can use these nodes, these packets in combination with other packages, other grasshopper packages, like for example, Galapagos, and try to make some optimization, some automatic optimization. I don't think we've got the time to cover that at all, but yeah, I mean, the opportunities are endless, really, in Grasshopper. And I think that should be it for Grasshopper. Feel free, as always, to ask all your questions in the Q&A session. And I think we have some time to check the Tekla Structures plugin as well, which is going to be very quick. Don't want to save that, no. So for those familiar with Tekla Structures, this is going to be quite interesting and useful, I guess. So Tekla Structures is used mostly by structural engineers. So it's going to be very, very useful actually when the design team or the structural engineers are trying to optimize their design in terms of embodied carbon and reduce the whole life carbon emissions of their project, because the structural frame and the structural system in general is actually most often responsible for the majority of the embodied carbon. So it's quite useful to have something like that in an early stage, or at the earliest possible stage, really, when the structural engineer has set up their Tekla Structures model. We've got a one-click LCA tab on the top, very similar with Revit. So once you click it, you've got only one option, which is called Send to One-Click LCA. Before I do that, I will need to select all the elements that I want to include in this assessment, so that you can leave some of the elements out of scope and so on. So I have selected all of them, and once I do that, I click on Send to one-click scale. And that should take a couple of more seconds to load all the different elements. And there we are. So in this window, we actually have all the different custom parameters, or as we call them in tech structures, user-defined attributes. And at this step, the software asks us if we want to add any of those parameters in our quantities takeoff. I'm not going to add any of those really, so I'll just click Add Same Cloud, and this will basically get all the different materials and start sending them to the cloud. And once the progress bar has reached this side of the window, it will direct me to my one-click LCA account. Now, because this is a very big model, it's going to take some time. So I don't think we really need to wait for that, because yeah, after this has been completed, it's exactly the same process as with all other integrations, really. And I think that should be it for today. We finished 5 minutes earlier than expected. So that's good, I guess. We have 5 more minutes to answer questions. So give me a couple of seconds to see if there are any questions. I see there are 59 questions that have been answered by my colleagues, and there are currently 3 more questions. So let's see. There is a question about, in regards to the exam, if all those integrations will be part of the questions. I think Stephen or some other colleague would be better placed to respond to that, but personally I wouldn't expect, because you do need to have a license for those software and yeah, make some practice. It might be, yeah, I don't know, it might be some generic questions.
Yeah, as Mario said, we'll be discussing the basics of the integrations, because of course integration is a very powerful tool to complete your LCAs much faster than doing it manually. But I won't ask you detailed questions about Tekla or Dynamo or anything like this. Like, don't worry about that.
Yeah. All right. Then we've got one more. So yeah, there is a question about the Grasshopper plugin and about the units. So the EPD or dataset or generic dataset that you are using, it comes with some some available units that it can be used. So if you plug in, for example, an EPD that requires the volume in a geometry that has only the area, then that material node will give you a warning and tell you that you also need to define the thickness in a similar way with the Rhino plugin as well. If that EPD can accept area quantities like square meters, then obviously it will just go with that, and it will not ask you for a volume or thickness. I hope that answers your question. There's a question about the duration of the exam, so I think that is also for Stephen.
I will announce that on Wednesday answering session.
Okay. Let's see what else. Oh, there is another question about alternative dates for the exam, if it can be offered. So I think I see Stephen is already answering that. And there is another question from Elizabeth about what is the best practice to extract information for LCA consultants who are typically not part of the design team. And the question is in terms of efficiency and time saving. I agree that as not being part of the design team, you might have to do some extra work because all the naming conventions are new to you. So, and also for your one-click LC account, which means that the software might not be able to find an automated map for every single material, especially if some of them are coded using some name conventions and so on. So for LCA consultants who deal with different models, I would say if it's not an early, if it is an early stage model, then we are probably talking for a very few, for a very small number of materials, so that shouldn't be a problem. But if we're talking for a end of stage 2 model, which is, although it is still concept design, but it's relatively big and detailed, but not necessarily accurate, we are talking about several different materials. So what you could do is, in this case, if you find, you could use the LCA in Revit, for example, and try to find all the different materials, as we saw, by isolating the materials. If you remember that, that button in the LCA in Revit plugin, find all those materials. You can click on edit type for those types, and you can check all the different information that are in there, like the type comments or type description and the various materials that are within that type, for example. And this will help you understand actually what kind of element that is, or what kind of material that is, instead of having to look into detailed drawings and plans and so on. So this would allow you to make a fair assumption. Another thing that I would suggest is, once you think you've done as much as you could in the LCA in Revit, or in Rhino or Grasshopper or any other plugin, you can send them to one-click LCA to the cloud application and basically download the Excel and do some further analysis in Excel if that is required. Yeah, that would probably be relevant for quite big models that are quite inaccurate, and yeah, the material names are not very helpful. So I would suggest that as well. And of course, yeah, I would also mention Carbon Designer as well. So if there are any elements that are very generic, you have no idea what they are, or you think you need too much time to find out what these are, and they are relatively minor elements, you could also exclude them from your Revit model or other model, upload everything else, and just complete the model with the use of Carbon Designer.
There's one comment that my colleague Costas also made is, if you do this kind of mapping or calculations inside the plugin, it's kind of optional. So you don't have to do that from an LCA point of view. If you want to go for certification purposes, you will have to complete the assessment on the one-click LCA platform. And you can there also combine any other type of data. So if you have perhaps part of a BIM model or energy model, or you have cost plans, you can all combine this on the platform and get the results for example, LEED or BRAM there as well.
All right. Yeah, there is another question about the one-click LCA. I think Costas is already replying to that. Another question about the exam. So I'm pretty sure that Stephen is gonna answer that. I think there was a similar question.
Yeah, the exam will indeed be on Friday, but we'll also have some options for taking it on other dates. But I'll announce that tomorrow.
Okay. And we have no open questions at the moment, so let's wait just a few more seconds just in case there is any other question coming up. And if not, I guess that would mean the end of this session. All right. Yeah, I think that should be it. No more questions. So yeah, Stephen, I think that should be it for today, right?
Yeah, thank you so much for today, Mario. That was great.
Thanks,
See y'all
everyone. I
tomorrow.
hope that was very useful. And yeah, good luck with your exam and enjoy the rest of the summer school.